to make decisions, and sometimes it's because of accountability. A lot of times they don't want to be accountable. How do you bridge that gap and create the culture of failure when you have speed and results, which can be opposing balance?
Yeah, culture of failure.
Let,
You
let
want
me
to speak?
let me
Go
let
ahead.
me address.
Sure.
That's a good question.
Yeah, great.
I think so. Let me give an example of one of the very good decision-making cultures. So Disney, when they're building new theme parks, they bring in their reimagineering people, who are mostly cultural anthropologists, and that reimagineering person comes up with a single word or two words that guide everybody's decisions on that project.
Hmm.
So they were building a new hotel in Hawaii, and the word they came up with was green. So if you're making a decision between the can of paint that's $14 but off gases, and the can of paint that's $21 that's natural and doesn't off gas and is better for the environment, green is your guiding principle. Choose the $21 can of paint. Or if you're thinking of paving in the rainforest next to the hotel versus building parking under the hotel, well, don't pave over the rainforest. Green. So what we focus on is the leader's obligation is to set that framework for the company and then allow people under the framework to make the specific decisions. If the leader's not setting the framework, then you need a new leader, or you need to coach that leader to do that. Um, but it's okay under that framework if people make mistakes sometimes, right? So long as they're not outside of the framework. But if they just make a mistake and they don't paint the wall correctly, but they chose the right can of paint, well, then they have an execution issue and they need to go back and repaint the wall. But the leader's principal obligation is to set the framework for decision making. So the best decision making cultures that we see at Vici Partners and our clients are executives who are willing to drive the overall framework for how the company makes decisions and then empower the individuals to go ahead and make decisions within that framework. So it's not really about agility. It's not about agility. It's about the overall framework and the buy-in of the organization to the framework, which then allows the agile decision making underneath. Right? The guy buying the can of paint can himself make the decision in 30 seconds about which can to buy because he has that overall framework of green. So the overall framework allows agile decision making that support the prime directive of the company on that particular project.
So adding to that also is that you mentioned about the culture of failure, right? What one thing I have observed in biotech companies is also that when the leaders fail, we need to definitely have a framework for sure. I think that's a great point. Under that framework, when the people are failing, demonstrate that hey, we failed, but we learned something out of it. So that is very critical for agility, right? We are embracing uncertainty. It is okay to be in an uncertain environment. It's okay to be in an uncertain situation. It's okay to fail as long as you're in the framework, but that also fosters that culture of embracing that uncertainty, allowing for mistake, actually showcasing that failure, and embracing that culture of innovation. So that is very, very critical. I think to me, I think it was very surprising and actually um, inspiring. We saw leaders showcasing, hey, I failed. Here's what I learned. But here's the decision framework. This is the time frame. And we are moving on. So does that make sense? Yeah, thank you very much. That was a great question. So moving on.
May I also address the two?
We are running into
Okay.
You want to say for a few seconds? Go ahead. Sorry.
Yes.
I'm
So
trying to manage the
feel like
time here too. Thank you,
I
Gemma.
can address both of those. So ours is a little unconventional because we start with culture building first, and then that culture will build the framework together. But the unorthodox element to it is that we start with imposter syndrome. It's such a weird way to start, but it's where a lot of people feel insecurities around making decisions It affects how they produce. It affects how they show up. It affects how they decide. And so when we can get a sense of that, those insecurities of imposter syndrome that people are having, because I work mostly with women, female teams, where that is, then we are getting a sense of where those, what is holding them back to feeling like they can step into their leadership, where they can step into, taking risks, because that will in turn help them by establishing those sort of identifying those issues that everyone might be having, and establishing all of these great rituals or policies or practices that will encourage it throughout the process. It changes the relationship to mistakes. It changes the relationship to failure. It changes the relationship to sole responsibility, to team responsibility. So I spend a whole day with these teams first, just to be able to establish where those insecurities are, because we need to know where they are so that we can support each other.
Thank you very much, Gemma and Alec, for answering this question. It was a difficult question, by the way. Thank you so much. So the next, I'm going to move on to the real world case study, and then we'll come back to Nirmalia. Thank you very much. So the question from me was about the real world case study, where a company is facing a major strategic challenge, and how would I approach that situation considering the principles of decision-making agility. So I will introduce myself too. My name is Vibha Chawla, and I'm with Focal Point. Have you guys heard of Brian Tracy? Okay, all right. So he has 4 million plus program graduates, and we basically help companies with increasing revenues. As Alec was talking about the profitability, I completely agree with decision making. Overall, I would say that the decision making is very, very critical, right? When we are doing the business coaching also in terms of business growth and revenues and profitability, the right decision at the right time is the right thing, and right decision at the wrong time is wrong. So we need to move very quickly in terms of business growth. How many of you are trying to actually grow your business? How many of you are trying to increase your revenues? Oh, quite a lot of you. Oh, please do talk to me. I am very passionate about growing revenues. So the example that I was going to give here is that one of my business owner, he came to me, he wanted to have or I guess he was in a situation where we had to increase his revenues by 400% very, very quickly, right? There was a lot of things going on in his business. I think Focal Point had about, I don't know, 70 plus strategies, figuring out that's where the decision-making framework comes into picture, right? How do we figure out of those 270 strategies, which ones are going to work for this business owner who needs a 400% increment in revenue? Very challenging task, and I'm thinking in my mind, this is quite impossible to do. And we ended up doing his assessment. We have a 3 to 5 minutes online assessment for all the business owners, whoever is interested. It takes 3 to 5 minutes, and you can come up with 3 to 6 action plans. So overall, we had to strategize, figure out which decisions will have the majority impact and highest probability of success. We came up with 3 to 6 action items that will help him with increment in the revenues. Do you know what those 3 action items could be? Can anybody guess? Would they have to set the goals? Could you raise your hands? Do they need to set the goals? Sometimes people ask me that question too. Goal setting is important, yes. Do you set it monthly, yearly, daily, weekly? What do you do? Daily, please. Write down daily. Write down the yearly goals, but write down daily. Very critical. Number 2 is the networking strategy, okay? We don't go everywhere. He was going everywhere. No, we don't go everywhere. We just go where their clients were. So that's what had to happen because we had to make sure he is successful. Number 3, what's the number 3? What do you need to do to increase your revenues? Marketing. You're going to say that, Siam. He's the marketing guy. He has to say that. No, we did not work on the marketing, for God's sake. Anybody else? What do you need to do to increase your revenues? Hmm? Find more leads is also related to marketing. No, we had to work on his selling strategy. Most importantly, we figured out if you your increment in the revenue. So those were the three things. Um, he had to change his style. Adaptability and agility came into the picture because he had to change his communication style to match with others so the others will listen to them. Because if others are not listening and if they're not making a decision, if they're not emotionally involved with him, they were not going to buy from him. That was pretty clear to me, and it was pretty clear to him. He did make a change. He was successful. We had a 400% increment in revenue. That was the success for decision making agility and the framework. We had a framework that we are going to make it in certain time frame, but the agility was definitely required there. We could not follow 100 strategies. We could not follow 10 strategies. We had to have only 3 strategies that he could work on. So be sane, be with family, have some time off, go on vacation. He did go on vacation, by the way, to Thailand. I haven't gone yet, but regardless. Anyways, can anybody relate to this? Did anybody have any increment or want to have such type of revenue increment? Nobody wants to have 400% increment in revenue? All of you guys want to have it. I can see that. All right. Thank you very much. That was my decision making agility real example. I loved it. I think it was a lot of fun for us. And with this, I'm going to go to Nirmalia. Nirmalia, if you can talk about some advice for enhancing everybody's decision making, agility, adaptability skills.
Sure. So I'll first introduce myself and relate it to the uh, work that we do, and uh, from there I'll elaborate on the decision-making agility uh, and how we do this. So I'm Nirmalia Banerjee. I'm the CEO and founder of Wildy. Wildy is a management consulting and advisory firm. We focus on innovation and innovative management framework. So, decision making and agility in decision making comes to picture in, as we have already discussed, it comes to every place and every person in business. So, everyone needs to be conscious and conscious about what kind of decision they are responsible to make, and they take the pathway to make those decisions. So decision making actually varies into two different categories, as business decision makers or everyday decision makers take care of their life and their everyday goals. First category is that we have two network in our brains. One is for daily activities or routine activities, and another is for exploration and innovation. So when we decide something, we first try to understand what the decision making is all about, what is the ask, and accordingly we decide the ask to into a decision. So to do that, we explore the world, and we explore the opportunities and the options that needs to be explored to understand what decision needs to be made. So that brain's exploration network comes into the picture. And when the brain's uh, everyday routine network comes into the picture, we become agile and quickly decide depending on our previous experience and expertise. So we can be very agile to decide on things which we have experience about, or which we have previously uh, experienced or participated in similar kind of things. So these two areas needs to be balanced when we are deciding, and we need to go data driven to do our exploration. So data-driven decision making is also organizations needs to follow to understand their exploration mechanism. Now, when the decision makers are actively organizing or actively acting in an organization, there can be two types of decision makers. One is democratic and another is dictators. So we need to understand the organizational culture that to promote democratic decision making so that people can participate in decision making along with their superior supervisors or peers. So, along with that, we have biases in decision making. We need to address biases before we decide something. We need to be conscious about our biases so that if it is a data bias, if it is a analytics bias, or if it is a knowledge-based bias, we need to understand those and we can eliminate those biases before we decide on something for the organization. So
Okay.
these are the main points I would recommend for organizational decision makers to address when they are addressing their decision making for their organization and as well as for their day-to-day activities.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nirmalia. That's very insightful as well. About removing biases kind of aligns with what Gemma was saying, but more yours is more analytics. So this is very helpful. Before we close the discussion here, are there any other questions from the audience? Go ahead, Sia. The funny man, of course.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Siam Pasarlai. It is SIAM, Siam. I'm personal branding strategist. I help people to grow them fast and with the social media, with your career, or in your business life. I see people spend a lot of money going to their conferences, on their education, on their business, but they don't spend money on their personal branding. So I always ask this question, what if I hear your name? What should come to my mind? So this is the question everybody should answer. And then when I want to work with them, so they have one problem. That problem is they cannot make decision all the time. They have fear. So now my question is here, how to remove this fear when we are making decision? And what are the consequences of making a decision if the decision is wrong, or even though for me it is personal branding, it is positive, but they have this fear. What if people see me on Facebook, on like TikTok, on YouTube, or if I become famous, how should I handle it? There are lots of fear. So I need this help, answer, how to remove this fear to get more clients. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Anybody else? I mean, I have my own opinion, but anybody else wants to chime in?
So I I could take this. Um, it's a good one. So at Peak Capital Trading, what we do, we help and assist individuals that want to get involved in the stock market and transition from whatever their career is to working their own business. Well, in order to do that, you have to learn to be wrong. If you ever want to trade the stock market, remember that. You have to be wrong. Think about a baseball player. A great hitter is 300. That means they failed 7 out of 10 times, and they're considered great. That kind of goes into what you're saying. Is what we try to do is to get individuals to quit thinking about what they can control. We as individuals are outcome oriented. We want to control every outcome. We want to make sure everybody's happy. We want to know what we're eating. We want to make sure we get to wherever we're going on time, and you do things. In the market, and also when you're trying to brand yourself on social media, you have zero control over what's going to happen. Zero. You have none. The market's going to go up or it's going to go down. You may think it's going to go up, and everything tells you it is, except Warren Buffett decides that he needs to sell everything today, which means it's going down. And you're wrong. You got to learn to live with that. And same on social media. You can post and be doing everything right. And then one person seasons like, you're a threat to my business and my organization. So now I'm going to try to come out and just target you. You have to be able to understand that, focus on the process of what you're trying to get to. And that's going to deter and eliminate some of that fear that you have of failing, right? It's like, okay, yeah, that happened, big deal. On to the next thing, let's go. On to the next thing, on to the next thing. So.
Gemma, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just want to
Go.
add one thing. So I would argue, I would challenge and invite this audience to stop thinking of everything as a decision and think about it as an experiment. Because when you think about it as an experiment, you are allowing yourself data to come in to inform what your next step is.
Absolutely.
So this is not about decisions, because when you do make a decision, you feel paralysis because you're like, what if it's wrong? What if it's not? When scientists do experiments,